Afternoon again, everyone. I'm Peter Thorsett, the Communications and Marketing Officer for the Division of Community Engagement and Career Readiness here at the University of South Florida in Tampa. And I'm excited to be joined by my colleagues, Bridgette and Lynn, and also to be joining our friends from the Florida Consortium of Metropolitan Research Universities today to talk to you a little bit about what we think the post-COVID-19 workplace might look like, and more importantly, how certain trends around career readiness skills, badging, and micro-credentialing are going to become a part of that broader change in the workplace. So today we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about where we are currently at. We bracket that out because currently is a moment by moment type of situation and is constantly evolving as all of us are living in the moment. I will then turn the floor, so to speak, over to my colleagues. Bridgette will be sharing with you a little bit about how Florida International University is responding to the current situation relative to career readiness and the development of skills. And then my colleague here at the University of South Florida, Lynn Chisholm, will talk about how we're responding here at USF. And then we'll leave some time at the end, hopefully, for some questions, answers, and discussion. One of the things that we're hoping to be able to do today is not be so lecture-y, and so my colleagues may jump in from time to time as I'm sharing some of the initial information just to kind of give us a more complete picture of what is currently happening in the talent marketplace. So with that in mind, I'm going to jump in and talk a little bit about where we're currently at. In this current moment, we are really seeing an acceleration of future-oriented workplace trends. If you were to ask me 8 or 9 weeks ago what I thought the future workplace might look like, what I would describe to you probably would sound an awful lot like science fiction or an episode of the Jetsons. I'm probably dating myself now, or some more modern shows. But I think that we're really seeing an acceleration of the adoption of a number of technologies and tools and resources that are really reshaping what the workforce needs to look like in order to operate successfully in this newly evolving and newly emergent workplace. One of the biggest things that we're seeing happen right now is workplace flexibility. The changes around that are significant. More and more Americans are able to work from home, and we're seeing the redeployment of human capital strategies to be much more agile oriented. So we're seeing a lot more in terms of how do we get the right worker into the right place at the right time. But the biggest driver of that is now a match by human resources professionals between the type of work that needs to be done in the moment and the type of skills that an employee happens to have in that moment. And where necessary, the delivery of just-in-time training and skill development, upskill and reskill. So that workplace flexibility is not just a physical change that's happening, it's also a change in the way that human beings are interacting within the workplace itself. We're also seeing a significant change or implementation of robotics and automation. Warehouse operations like those of Amazon and Walmart and here in Florida, Publix, are having to rely more and more quickly on robotics and automation to fulfill more and more delivery of goods and services directly to the home. The solving of what's known as that last mile challenge is also impacting supply chain and logistics questions. And so we're seeing organizations really zero in on how robotics and automation and supply chain and logistics are coming together in order to make sure that they're able to keep the flow of goods and services functioning normally in this current time and beyond. We're also seeing organizations rely more on the use of artificial intelligence, especially in conjunction with big data and information utilization. Organizations are trying to figure out more quickly and more accurately how to make sure, again, they're in the right place at the right time. Taken together, all of these future-oriented workplace trends are changing the type of employee that's needed in order to make things happen. And that's happening across the spectrum, whether we're talking about more traditional hands-on labor, such as in warehouses, or we're talking about white-collar employees who are working in offices like attorneys or supply chain logistics professionals. Those changes in the workforce are also now driving changes in how HR is responding. And so as more automation comes online, as artificial intelligence takes over tasks typically performed by people in an office space, positions are being eliminated. We're certainly seeing that across the board, and there aren't any particular industries right now that are spared. We often talk about healthcare as being recession-proof, and yet in this pandemic, we saw a number of organizations where surgeries, outpatient surgery centers, and those types of short-term care facilities were shut down. And so industries that we often thought were recession-proof proved in this particular pandemic scenario to not be so recession-proof as we once thought. Positions are also being outsourced. HR's use of contingent workforces is growing quickly. Again, I think there is a drive to be able to match the right types of human capital immediately to the types of needs that businesses are trying to solve in the moment. Certainly organizations like Korn Ferry are seeing significant rise in the requests and requisitions for employees who can work on temporary projects. And certainly the rise of the gig economy continues at a rather accelerated pace during this current situation. Positions are also being reconfigured. So as offices are closed, as facilities transition from supporting one type of work or face-to-face consumer interactions to being completely online or remotely moderated, positions are having to be reconfigured. And so again, the focus on how we can get the right human capital into the right place becomes really critical. And the ways that organizations are doing that is by aligning specific tasks that need to be performed with the skills that are required to complete those tasks successfully. So again, a very significant shift in how HR organizations are helping their companies and their organizations redefine and reconfigure employee positions. We're also seeing position upgrades happening in this current environment. And while we wouldn't necessarily think that that would be the case, especially as there's a lot of talk about the economic impacts of this current pandemic, employers are still looking to protect critical human capital resources and to make sure that they are keeping them from being poached by organizations that may be in need of very specific skill sets. So you're still seeing position upgrades, you're still seeing promotions in certain cases, again, oftentimes revolving around specific skills to support specific transitions happening in the business. And so again, companies are being very strategic about how they do that. And finally, we're seeing HR organizations within larger companies and organizations really working with their leadership and with their line management to create new positions to support those areas that may not have existed before. And that is also happening at a much more accelerated rate. A great example from McKinsey just last week was a look at a healthcare organization in Europe. They had a 2-year telehealth program mapped out to be implemented by 2022, and they accelerated that to be implemented in just a few weeks. And so that shifted the entire HR hiring model for that organization to really accelerate not only the types of reconfigurations and upgrades that needed to happen, but the types of positions that had to be created and hired to support a telehealth environment that did not exist just a few weeks ago. As these changes are happening, one of the things that we often miss or lose sight of, and you've heard me talk a little bit more about than you may have heard in the past, is the role of human resources and human resources information systems. We often talk about the skills gap between students who are graduating from college and going into the workforce, but we don't talk about where often that skills gap occurs. And typically where it emerges is when an employer is making decisions around hiring, around promotion, around retention strategies, and they utilize HRIS systems to make those types of decisions. In 2019, venture capital organizations invested nearly $2 billion in market segment innovations. And you'll notice in particular in recruitment, a focus on AI-based sourcing, the use of advanced analytics, the use of behavioral assessment, and work management and contingent work management tools. You'll also notice as it goes across a lot of focus on reskill, upskill types of functions around the training and development function within human resources. Again, HR is making this pivot to skills-based hiring and skills-based placement within their organizations because that's how they remain agile in an environment that's in a significant amount of flux. That's important because we want to keep in mind how companies are behaving as they try to fill occupations or positions in their organizations and how we help students move from college into the workforce. If you've heard any of myself or my colleagues speak in the past, we are all very big believers that there is not necessarily a skills gap that exists writ large in the college to work transition. There are certainly places where skills could be improved or where skills could be taught a little more explicitly. But for the most part, when we're talking about college students graduating with a baccalaureate degree and going into those entry-level positions that require a baccalaureate degree, the match between skills and what an employer needs and what colleges are teaching is pretty well aligned. I think what we're experiencing in many ways is that the alignment is out of whack between the idea of explicit, implicit, and essential skills. And so in this particular example, we often talk about biotechnology firms posting positions for entry-level pharmaceutical researchers and wanting to hire chemistry students, recent chemistry student graduates. And so that chemistry student taking coursework may have encountered through their syllabi and through their coursework the development of explicit skills and competencies in doing formulations, in understanding how to run lab experiments, in understanding how chemical bonds work. Implicit to their education were all of their lab bench skills, all of their safety skills, all of the things necessary to operate and behave in a laboratory setting safely and efficiently, but never quite laid out explicitly for them. That was just part of the training and the experience of being in a college laboratory. And finally, those students through their coursework had to write up lab reports and had to do presentations to their class or to their professors about what they learned. Again, developing the essential skills that employers are looking for around written communications, verbal communications, critical thinking, design thinking, all of those things that are important for long-term career success. The challenge is that we put students in the middle of this translative process where they're required to understand how to take the explicit, implicit, and essential skills developed during their 4 years in college and translate those to the things that employers are looking for. So oftentimes you'll see postings from employers explicitly saying you need to be able to work safely in a lab environment, but implicitly asking for pharmaceutical researchers who understand how chemical bonds work. They're not going to spell that out in a job description. Well, when students look at that with their limited experience in terms of processing what a job posting looks like and how to apply for that, they look at that and think, well, I don't have the right skills. I never had those experiences. I never had that training. I never had a course in lab safety. And so they pass on those opportunities. And as employers accelerate the move to skills-based hiring and accelerate the move to using skills in their retention and promotion strategies, the ability of empowering our students, or empowering our students with the ability to be able to do that translative process becomes more and more critical. In fact, they need to be able to not only do that for their first job, they need to understand how their experiences in their current position lead to what comes next. And so that's really what's given rise to this idea of the use of micro-credentials. And so the biggest key to thinking about micro-credentials today is really how we're atomizing or taking the monolithic credential of a baccalaureate degree and breaking it down into its core components. It's not about rewriting the curriculum. It's not about saying that the curriculum is incorrect. It's about a belief that the curriculum is correct and that the curriculum is what employers need. But it's about empowering our students to be able to take all of those pieces that made up that big degree and be able to understand how they align to the job requisitions that employers are looking to fill. So micro-credentials in particular can be issued and should be issued as learning is completed or upgraded. So if you reskill or upskill, you should continually upgrade your micro-credentials to show employers that you have current relevant skills for their current needs. Micro-credentials are also important because they can be reused by the learner for new applications. Because they're atomized, they can be reconfigured in ways that allow the student or the graduate to be able to think about what comes next, really supporting them for that third bullet point, lifelong career success. We want our students to be able to pull all of those pieces together, think about where they're at, and then when they're ready for their next move, to break all of those back apart, put them back together in the new way, and move forward. Micro-credentials as a technology component are important because they're portable and owned by the learner. So a micro-credential issued by FIU goes with that learner and can be then consumed if they go to work for, say, Amgen. And then as that student, now employee, upgrades their skills, those credentials then can be portable because they're owned by the learner and brought to USF for a master's degree in chemistry. So that interoperability between IT systems, learning management systems, student information systems, and human resources information systems becomes much more seamless because of this portability and because of the fact that they're owned by the learner. So that gives you kind of a brief introduction to kind of where we think we're at right now, and where we think micro-credentials fits into the broader strategy of helping our students understand the skills that they're developing and how they can bring those forward with them as they enter and progress in the workforce. I'm now going to turn it over to Bridgette, who's going to talk a little bit about what FIU is doing.
Thank you so much, Peter. Hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be here along with Peter and Lynn on behalf of the Metropolitan Consortium. So I'm briefly going to talk about FIU's response in the context of micro-credentialing. I'm going to start out just giving a brief on our policy on micro-credentialing, how we were building buy-in and planning for scale, and then as COVID-19 happened, how that was the impetus for us to scale a little bit faster. I'm going to talk about some of the things we've learned and how this model will help us prepare our learners even better for their future careers, as Peter has highlighted. Next slide, please. So why is FIU looking at micro-credentials? What we're trying to do is shift our focus to learners and not just students. So we know that learners come in many forms, right? So there are currently enrolled students, there are our own staff and faculty, there are alumni, and there are greater community at large. So the question that we've been asking is, how can we help all learners truly validate their skills? And that is why we started to look at micro-credentialing as a solution for this. Next slide, please. So briefly, just the FIU framework, when we think about micro-credentialing, as Michael noted at the beginning, I am with academic and student affairs. So micro-credentialing at FIU is centralized, and our Office of Micro-credentialing really is a liaison for administrative units and academic units to help integrate micro-credentialing across the entire pathway, whether that's within a course, as a co-curricular, or through continuing education. However, regardless of how a learner earns a micro-credential, they have to follow these basic tenets. So it must be competency-based. Whatever skill they're learning has to be distilled into a competency so that badge really reflects what a learner is able to do. It needs to be rigorous. So we're looking at the student learning outcomes and how they're assessed, which is also very important. We want them to be aligned to demand, whether that's demand through industry or for what a postgraduate credential might look like. it needs to be comprehensive. And when we say comprehensive, we're really talking about giving the learner an opportunity to reflect on that learning and how it connects to their own academic, personal, or professional goals. So that concept of metacognition is built into our micro-credentialing process. And then, of course, it needs to be stackable and portable, which is exactly what Peter just referenced to, that the student should be able to carry these micro-credentials with them through their different professional and educational endeavors. Next slide, please. So we had started this process, we developed the policy, we worked with people to get buy-in, we were working with faculty in different units, we were part of the badging fellows cohort with the Education Design Lab. So we really planned to use summer to solidify that plan. So moving into fall, we'd be ready to scale. And then of course, we know that with COVID-19, everyone had to pivot and start moving a little bit differently. So I am happy to say that we are working on a lot of micro-credentials in the pipeline for learners at various stages in their career. But one of the ways that we scaled really quickly was with our student employee population and other students who were interested in remaining engaged while they were working and learning remotely. Because we do know in this instance that students are struggling to find that connection that they usually would have if they were on campus. So we did have a number of students volunteer for this pilot process in addition to our student employees. One of the first things we struggled with though, or grappled with I should say, is with the shift to online learning, we were piloting using micro-credentials within 3 of our English courses. So that was part of our Badging Fellows project. So we were trying to figure out how do you integrate these skills into the classroom, because we know, as Peter noted, they're learning all of these really, really important skills and competencies, but sometimes they're not able to make that direct connection. So for us, making sure that these credentials are integrated within the curriculum is a really great way to connect the learning to how students can speak about their skills upon graduation. So our faculty were wonderful, amazing, super flexible. We were able to get those students rolled over so that they were able to finish that badge in their English courses. So we were really excited about that. And then HR said, we'd really love to, fast track our plans to get our students engaged in these micro-credentials, because one of the things we've been thinking about is how do we engage student employees in a competency building program, right? So we're doing all of this great PD, supervisors are mentoring their students, they're learning these things, but when a student employee leaves, how are they able to talk about how impactful that FIU employment was in developing some of these really critical skills? So we were able to ramp up initiative and resilience in a completely asynchronous format all through Canvas. I had some really wonderful faculty help me build that out very quickly, again, using the Ed Design Lab sub-competencies as a framework. And we enrolled over 500 students within 3 weeks of developing those micro-credentials. And I'm happy to say we've already issued 23 to those student employees. There's over 179 students still active, but what was really important for us was that we kind of felt lucky that we picked initiative and resilience, because they're really meaningful right now with, helping learners have initiative to be, able to manage themselves remotely, the resilience to get through the things that they're going through right now. So it really fit. And when we designed the assignments for these modules, we actually put in sections about how are you applying these competencies when you think about how you're learning or working remotely. So I think micro-credentials also offer this a really wonderful way to quickly adapt curriculum or co-curricular activities to things that are happening right now. They're going to be able to demonstrate this competency in a number of different ways, and having them reflect on these two in particular were really meaningful, and I think helped them put some of those things that they're going through down on paper and process that as well. So that worked out really well. And then of course, we also launched a Fundamentals of Financial Literacy badge, which is aligned to technology we're using now financial literacy technology. And we felt that this one was really important too, because students are also grappling with how to pay for things, how to find emergency aid, how to understand how to manage their money, especially now during a pandemic, but also focusing on, as you think of your next career, if something like this were to happen, how do you make sure that you are financially secure to get through that? So that is where we are this summer in terms of our students. We're very excited about that. Next slide, please. So from what we've learned so far, and I think this is the slide that I'm most excited about, is that you can do these things completely asynchronously, right? We were a little concerned that students would not be engaged, that we couldn't, keep track of them, that they would lose interest and not want to participate. But we have found that students are opting into this and they are getting something out of it. Of course, some of the feedback is this isn't quite as engaging as if I was in person. So we're hoping that as we move through summer and fall, that we can have a more cohorted model so that the communication is a little more fluid. We do offer Zoom office hours though, so that has been a time when students can kind of jump in and ask us questions. As I've said earlier, these skills are really critical. I think that this has given us great information and feedback that these skills, as related to emotional intelligence, social intelligence, are very important, and students are willing to do the work. So you can just see here some feedback that students learn things they didn't expect that they could learn that would apply to their personal lives, that they believe that this helped them be better equipped than they were before, and that it really was a lot of work on them as people. So we find that extremely valuable and are happy that students did get that value out of it. The last thing is that training is really, really important. How do we navigate, students working through these competencies? Because they are talking about things that are personal, that are impacting them. So having the empathy as a grader and facilitator is really, really critical. So when I asked some of my colleagues to help grade, one of the people that's helping me grade is a student ombudsperson. So has that training, another faculty member is helping me who has, those skills that are important to walk students through this. So that's just something to keep in mind, that when you're working on things that have more of a personal connection, you have to be prepared to intervene and reach out to students who need that extra support, because it's very personal and very important. Next slide, please. So again, just really quickly to wrap up, how did we do it and where are we going? I think that having the policy in place was really helpful, because as people are interested in leveraging micro-credentials, we were able to kind of get them, in line in terms of what that looks like, student learning, assessment. The university-wide collaboration is really important. We're seeing people come together from different places to work together and figure out how we can really integrate these skills. The commitment to our learners, President Rosenberg is very passionate that FIU not only serves our students, but our community. So that commitment really helps with moving an initiative like this along. And then, of course, our plans for the future, we're continuing to scale. We have more interest every day, and aligning and designing those programs so that we can really have this fit within the curriculum, outside of the curriculum, and for our continuing education students. And I think with that, I will pass it over to Lynn.
Thank you, Bridgette, and thanks for your help, Peter. So you're going to hear me echo a lot of things that Bridgette said. The great thing about being part of the consortium effort is that we can collaborate around how we're serving our students. And so many of the things that Bridgette just shared are things that I'll probably talk about, but maybe a little bit differently. So what was happening at USF when we were sort of about to be hit by COVID-19? Well, our timelines for projects, our deadlines were more generous. Like FIU, we were planning for fall. We thought we had plenty of time to do a number of the things that we were working on. Some of those things included expanding our high impact practices, looking at different ways that students might build capacity, build skills, build competencies, offering them somewhat of a stepping stone process so that they could see their growth as they moved along that pathway and pipeline. Being able to increase virtual internship and learning opportunities, taking project-based learning to the next step, and being able to create some opportunities that could help us utilize that as a high impact practice, expanding our engaged student employment model, which is a way of enhancing our on-campus student employment so that it functions more like a high impact practice and utilizes also our badging program. We were looking at, and had been for some time, micro or mini internships, looking at how those might fit into our catalog of experiential learning opportunities, and really just sort of giving students a clearer idea of how they might package those things as they work towards earning micro-credentials, such as through our career readiness badging program. So it all looked very doable in January. And then we also were making plans to build out and roll out our career advocacy concept. And this was encouraging us to look at a more intentional way of serving our students, scaling out our services so that we could serve more of our students, being able to kind of provide them with just-in-time resources, so in a timely manner based on their needs. And this shift, was recognizing the fact that we were mostly serving students who showed up. So if they showed up to the Career Services Center or to a career fair, we helped them. But we knew that we needed to do more because we have 50,000 students and 3 campuses, and this just wasn't, this didn't feel like we were doing enough. So again, we were beginning those plans. And then my analogy to what happened with COVID-19 was a little bit like what happens when you're sailing and you have to change because you either need to go in a different direction or the wind is changing, and your captain yells, "Come about," and everybody flies into their position and they're trimming the sheets and they're jumping to the other side of the boat and they're ducking and they're bailing and they're trying not to fall out, and it's for a moment chaos as you move that boat into a different direction. And that's kind of what it felt like for us. We had many things online. We were confident that we could move them online, but our call from the captain went from "we will be working remotely" to "it's happening Monday." And not only did we have to move our work online, just like you, we had to move our services and our programs online. We had to assist our interns out in the field. Our employers were, asking us, what should we do? Other campuses were reaching out going, what are you doing? How are you handling it? So there was this mass chaos as we were changing the direction of our ship and trying not to lose momentum because we are well into the semester and it's midterm. So it was quite the experience, as I'm sure all of you have, could like amen sister right now. So as we did that, part of what our response was to build resources, right? So we're putting together toolkits to support our employers and our students. Then the call came out, oh my goodness, our employees, not all of our employees can work remotely. What can we do for them? And what can we do for student employees who may not be able to work remotely? So we were having to be very creative, very quickly, and come up with a broad range of resources to support our campus, our community, and just, not with any kind of prepared game plan. So what we then found was that our badging program became like the star of the show. That was a resource that we could offer to any of our students on campus, off campus, in any particular role, whether they were a student employee or an intern. And it also became an important professional development resource for our student employees who were displaced. So if their work could not be done remotely, it enabled them to continue doing some work in the area of professional development to be able to reflect on what they had done so far, how their experience was helping them to build those competencies and to prepare for the world of work. Like FIU, we built a relationship with the Ed Design Lab and implemented some of their modules. We picked creative problem solving, which also seemed like a very useful one for our students as they were kind of figuring out what's happening next. And we tried out, we wanted to see what it was like to have that platform as another opportunity for our students. We also looked at other resources like ePortfolio, and that was something that our campus had been engaged in and was using in a variety of ways, whether it was tied to a high impact practice experience like an internship, or whether it was incorporated into an academic course like English. We had been moving forward with those efforts, but all of a sudden, again, given our virtual world, ePortfolio became very important, and we knew that that was another way to help our students develop professionally, to showcase this work, not only to be able to show off the badges that they were hopefully earning, but to be able to highlight projects that they had worked on and completed. And we encouraged them. We said, talk about how you're responding to this new way of working. Talk about how you shifted. Talk about the skill sets that you had to put to use to finish these projects. Because they were going through the same things that we were when we were having to move from a face-to-face environment to one that now was all virtual. So it gave us a way that we could coach them around that and give them a platform through which to show off those skills. We also, as mentioned, we were working on micro internships, but we fast-tracked that. We moved that forward really quickly because that gave us another way to offer our students avenues for experience. And our relationship is with Parker Dewey, who has been very supportive, especially as we were so tight for our own resources to help move this forward. It's been a nice way for us to kind of move students into a different way of building experience and to develop as professionals. Before we go to the next slide, I'll just also mention that as Peter was talking about changes in the workforce, probably like many of you, we saw a lot of changes as well. Positions were going from full-time to part-time. Internships were going from paid to unpaid, not our favorite thing. We saw lots of opportunities where employers wanted to keep interns working but didn't know how. Or they were saying, check back with us in a couple of weeks. Check back with us in a couple of weeks. So we kept kind of moving that forward as we looked at, what are they going to be able to do? What do they need from us? And we had to sort of be flexible with them as we move through all of these changes as well. I think back in the last time we had an economic recession, we saw a lot of employers who thought, well, I've had to lay off some employees. I'll pick up some unpaid interns. So that's not legal, and it's sometimes fallen to us to kind of gently remind employers that that's not an avenue that they can pursue. However, we've been a little flexible with some of our employers as they've offered internships, but stated to us, look, we're sorry, we cannot pay them. Given that we've had enough of those shifts in internships, we've talked to them about, hey, we'll give you a pass because of all of this, but we would like to work that internship back into a paid position. So, just negotiating with our employers, looking at creative ways to be able to help them and help our students. Lots and lots of communication and conversations, online meetings, emails. The thing that I think has been kind of the most notable, I guess not surprise, but necessary part of this experience is that communication became more important than ever. And the important side of it, I think, was keeping people informed, keeping our students informed, keeping our employers informed. And as I shared with Peter and Bridgette earlier, I've never had so many of my student interns reach out to me before and say, thank you for helping me get through this semester. And I was like, we did it together. It really took kind of that village approach to getting us successfully across the spring semester 2020 finish line. Okay, next slide. Thanks. So we like to think that we've created this beautiful pathway for our students, that it's straight, it's sunny. This is how you get into your career. These are the skills, right? But how they really see it is a little bit more of a wild ride, and it may vary for them given any given semester, or what their internship demands are or their employment demands are. So they're not always sure of where they're going in this environment that they're trying to navigate. And they, I think they've shared that a lot this semester, that there were just so many unknowns, and they didn't know, what they might have to do next, or what they were going to be able to do next, or, building new skills quickly if they had moved from in-person to remote. And so, next slide, please. What that did to them was to completely challenge their ability to navigate this situation, and ours as well. We didn't always know what to tell them, which exit to get off, which way to go, what they might expect if they were going down a particular pathway, and all of a sudden there are changes. So I think one of the things that we've tried to do for our students is to consider this new remote working environment, and what we need to be telling them now and in the future to enable them to be successful and to be able to navigate this. And again, in some ways, we're figuring it out along with them. So next slide. We've tried to kind of put our ear to the ground and listen as much as possible to what our students are telling us, what employers are telling us, what workforce data is telling us, what trends we're seeing throughout this pandemic, and what it may mean for the future in terms of their work skills. To kind of echo what Bridgette said, we're having to train them. Here's how to be in an online meeting. Do not have your bedroom in the background. I was having technical issues, so this was my last minute office space. So just all those different things that, they might not think about, but we need to make sure that they understand as they're interviewing for positions virtually and potentially working in online spaces for some period of time. We're also hearing that employers to some extent, and our students to some extent, or our coworkers, don't think that there will be a reset back to the way things used to be. That this means, we learn from this and move it forward. We don't simply go, whew, glad that was over, and move back. So as we do that, again, we've learned how important the micro-credentials were for our students, not only from a professional development perspective, but just as they moved forward to showcase their work to an employer and to be able to display the ways in which they earned those micro-credentials and the projects that were part of that learning. We also know that we've all had to advance our technical skills for working remotely, maybe getting familiar with new platforms, understanding the differences between those platforms, understanding how to use them effectively, and being really somewhat fluent in the platforms that support working remotely. Since, in any given day, you could be in a meeting on 3 or 4 different platforms. We also want them to continue that professional development, again, echoing Bridgette, thinking about themselves as lifelong learners and understanding that, what they've completed today is part of what they'll continue to build as they go forward. Because so many things are online, their written communication skills have become very important. Being specific, being clear, being concise, being professional. And so that's been a piece that we've emphasized through our badging program all along, but also attention to it as we know what that's going to take to really prepare them to be resilient as they move into the workplace. And personal accountability. So personal accountability is a thing that I think once upon a time your supervisor could pop in your office and say, hey, can you update me on that project? Where are we? Now that's got to be managed differently. So what software or applications are you using to manage those things? Can you easily share them? Are you tracking your work in such a way that you can report to your supervisor, here's where this project is now, here's what I've gotten done, and getting them comfortable with that, not from a perspective of big brothers watching you, but just understanding that when you work virtually, there is a trust factor that needs to be in place, and you do that by having some transparency about the work that you're involved in and how that's being moved forward. The other thing that's been really important to us, again, kind of echoing back to our career advocacy talk, is career self-management. So we want our students to be in the driver's seat. We want them to be able to manage their careers. We want them to be able to see this experience as a way of, you know, why that's important for them to be able to be in that driver's seat. But we're here with you. We're feeding you data and information. We're providing you with resources. We're giving you a roadmap to be able to say, there's a curve up ahead. You might want to be ready for that, and just kind of give them some information to help them navigate as they move that career forward. And one of the things that I think has been interesting for me is I've had 3 20-somethings in the house with me. 2 graduated in December, 1 just graduated last Saturday, and they're all adding additional credentials to that degree. They're all saying, great that I graduated, but I need a certificate that shows I can do this, or I need a certificate that shows I can do that. So they know, not because of me, just because they're thinking about where they want to take their careers, that they've got to add additional credentials to be able to really show to an employer that they've got the skills and the knowledge that a particular position might need. But before I shift it back for discussion, I just want to quote my son, who said that he hopes that as we're all going through might just be what this current generation needs in order for their voice to matter when it comes to the future of work. So I think that, you know, that was sort of an interesting perspective, and we've known that this generation has wanted to give voice to what happens next in the world of work, or what the expectations are, or how they navigate their careers. And so this environment may just be that opportunity. So thank you.
Fantastic. You guys did a really, really great job. I took like an unnecessarily long and just gobs and gobs of notes so that I can share with the students in my life. So in the remaining time, we have a handful of questions, and I'm going to just go ahead and save for, because a few people asked. This session is being recorded. It will be sent to people that registered, but it will also be on our website, I think, in 40 or 24 hours. So that question came in a handful of times. But another question, and this was one that came in kind of earlier, in terms of your micro-credentialing and programs, do you consider soft skills as one of the areas that, in the programs?
Yes, I'm sure we will all love to comment on that one, but our badging program at USF is based on the NACE career readiness competencies, and they have often been referred to as soft skills. They're communication and teamwork, but we often prefer to call them essential skills because we know how important they are in the workplace. Additionally, our library has been a wonderful partner with us on our campus, and they've built some additional badging opportunities for our students that typically also blend in some technical skills that may be related to doing research or other academic projects, but also building skills around different careers and blending in those soft skills or essential skills as part of that learning.
Thank you. Bridgette, did you want to jump in on that, or?
Sure. I mean, I agree 100% with Lynn. I think the two examples we gave, initiative and resilience, may traditionally be thought of to fall in that category. And we also are looking at, what we call those skills. And I like the term essential skills.
Excellent. So another question came in, and I'll just read it verbatim. It says, I think micro-credentialing is beneficial to our community. How will students and community members access it? And is there a cost associated with it on your campus? So that's like, USF's point of view and FIU point of view, I think would be helpful to the person that submitted this question.
So for us, we offer it to enrolled students and also through continuing education programs, right? And it depends on the cost. Some continuing education programs are offered for free and some do have a charge with them. But for our currently enrolled students, if it is something that happens within the curriculum or as part of an organized co-curricular that would not be thought of as continuing ed, then students are not charged a fee for that.
Peter?
So for our program, we do not charge for the badging program here at USF. We view our program very much as a walk alongside type of program to the curriculum and co-curricular activities. So as part of the way that our badges are structured, the students complete 3 steps: a learn it, a do it, and a show it. The learn it is what they're already learning in those classes. So what they're doing is redeclaring that to us. They're answering some questions about that experience. They're kind of doing some metacognitive processing about that experience and relating it to their work aspirations. And do it, they're applying that skill and thinking about how that might have been developed in an internship or an on-campus research opportunity or a student employment opportunity. And then in show it, we ask students to essentially complete a behavioral-based interview question where they talk about those experiences in relationship to something they're going to encounter either in a job posting or in a job interview scenario. More broadly speaking, badging programs can be offered for free. Badger is a free solution. It's part of what's called the Open Badging Consortium, which is run by IMS Global and the folks at Badger. It was developed by the MacArthur Foundation and IBM and Mozilla a few years ago and was kind of given to the world to use for free. You can certainly pay for advanced reporting and advanced integration features, but at its core, anyone can issue badges and students can create what's called a backpack and take all of those badges with them. So that's what makes it portable. And the fact that that's free and open source is what really makes this exciting to those of us who work in the IT field, because now we can actually have some system interoperability to be able to take badges from FIU and USF and UCF and other institutions and put those in one place that student or an employer or another educational institution can use to validate what our students know. So you can do it for free if you want to. That's what we did at USF. But there's certainly other paid options out there that offer you a whole bunch more in terms of bells and whistles.
Fantastic. And I know we have just 2 more minutes, so I'll just throw up a hard question for the last one. And this is, I think it's kind of maybe a how-to and a hypothetical for somebody that's at an institution that maybe not as far along as USF and FIU. So the question is, how can you do micro badging without e-portfolios? Where would a micro badge go if you didn't have one? Does FIU or USF have a model, I guess, that can be shared is sort of the question.
So you actually, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So at FIU, there's 2 ways you can do this, right? You can have everything in Canvas. You can have things completed in Canvas, and once that's done, the badge can either be auto-issued or manually issued, depending on how you have that set up. So and I'm sure that can be done in any other LMS. It does not have to be Canvas. We just use that at FIU. Or, there are ways to track things, and for faculty or staff that did not want to set up an entire LMS system, as long as I'm getting scanned artifacts and proof that the students did what they were supposed to do, we can manually issue the badge. So you do not have to have a formal e-portfolio system to have a badging program.
And on the other end of that experience, I would just also add that we try to do a good job of informing our students about environments through which to share their badges. And even if they are not a digital environment, maybe it's the student's resume, that digital badge has a URL that they can list on their resume as part of either an accomplishment related to their internship or kind of showcasing their strengths within particular competency areas, and the employer can verify that that student has earned that badge by using that URL. So it doesn't necessarily have to be showcased in a digital environment if that's not practical for the student or they don't have any portfolio. But there are other ways they can share that out. They can do that through social media. They can use LinkedIn. So I think that's the beauty of the digital micro-credentials. I can share that pretty quickly with an employer versus a printed certificate that I might have to scan and email or find some other route. And it just is not as functional for that student or that employer as that digital micro-credential, which is encrypted with information about how that student earned it and what it means.
And then just to finish that thought, where Bridgette was talking about manual issue of badges, through the Badger platform or Credly or any of these third-party issuers, you can create an account and have your whole badging program live offline. You could teach the students, offer a workshop, have them complete activities, and when you're ready to issue the badge, you just go online to Badger and issue the badge manually. So you're keying that in for that student to get the award. But you can do all of that again for free by using a lot of those tools that are online. So the whole continuum from what Lynn and Bridgette were talking about on the instructional side to what I'm talking about on the technical management side, you can do all of that for free, and you don't have to have an e-portfolio or an LMS even to do this. You could do it completely in a classroom, face-to-face, and still have a student walk away with a